It is September 23rd, 2023. This is Political Dharma, and I am Alan Zundell. Well, we've been talking here about the campaign of Dr. Cornel West for the presidency of the United States as he seeks the nomination of the Green Party of the United States, and I'm going to return to that topic today. I also want to return to the topic of democracy and political parties. Now, in one or two episodes previously, I asked the question, is the Democratic Party really a supporter of democracy? And I answered in the negative, and I'm still going to hold to that. But today I'm going to ask a different question, which is whether the Green Party of the United States also has a democracy problem. And I think it does, but it's of a totally different nature than that of the Democratic Party. So those are my two topics for today, connected with each other, and I will explain how as I go forward. But first, we're going to take a look at a newer clip of Brianna Joy Gray talking to Peter Dow, Cornel West's new campaign manager, about a number of things. But these clips are going to focus on their strategy for the election campaign. I'm not interested in revisiting the question of Peter Dow himself, whether he's a good fit for the campaign, whether he's an infiltrator of some kind. Not interested in that. I'm more interested in what he has to say about how the campaign is shaping up and what their intentions are for that. So this clip is from just a couple of days ago. Again, Brianna Joy Gray on the Bad Faith podcast on YouTube. So let's see what they have to say.
Dr. West and I had our initial conversation, we talked about what that means. What is a campaign manager's role? You have to know everybody's job better than everyone on your team. So when I'm having a conversation about NGP Dan or Nation Builder or Action Network or some sort of CRM platform or email platform, I literally have to know all the technology myself so that I can talk to the team. When it comes to volunteer mobilization, when it comes to all the various aspects, fundraising, finance, messaging, communication, social media, is this TikTok video edited properly? And so it's a skill set of knowing every single aspect of the campaign as well, if not better than the team you're leading. And that comes from many years of experience.
Right. And I do wonder whether or not, what Cornel, how the team is looking at some criticisms about the website not being perhaps as fleshed out, less of a focus on policy in some of the interviews that have been done, and questions about whether or not there really are the resources to ramp up in various states across the country as is required of a national campaign.
In terms of the campaign website, in terms of Dr. West's position, in terms of fleshing that all out, that's all part of the process of what I'm here to do, because there are mechanics to that. Somebody has to do that. You have to, talk to him and sit down because these are his positions, not somebody's just going to sit and write it. Now, he's represented these things for all his life. So every campaign, including this one, starts from a kernel, and that kernel is the candidate and their values. Everything else is structured around that. You start building out the team. You build a volunteer operation to be able to connect with people who want to help. Thousands of people have signed up for this campaign. And now we're in the process, now that I'm on board and methodically connecting with them, giving them the materials and the support they need to go out and spread the word across the country. So fleshing out his position is just another piece of it. And we're going to be out there, though. Dr. West is going to be, everywhere. Picket lines, protests, marches. He's going to be out there more than other candidates and representing the people that other candidates are not going to do. So yeah, we'll be out there. Come to the website, sign up, donate, volunteer, whatever you can do to help. We appreciate it.
So what we heard from those clips in various parts of the interview was that they have in mind, Peter Dow has in mind for Cornel West, a much more professional level campaign than I imagined. What I said last week was that since Dow was an expert in digital strategy and digital operations for campaigns, that they would probably be running a low-cost, largely digital campaign of interviews on podcasts and things like that, trying to stay below the radar as they built up resources for the general election campaign. But I hear him saying now that they are trying to amp up quickly to do a lot of things, get volunteers engaged right away, raise money, have Cornel West not only engaging in online interviews, but showing up for rallies and at picket lines and to give speeches around the country. So it's much more the shape of a conventional campaign, much more ambitious, I think. We'll see how it all pans out. But I've seen that in effect in my email box when I got a recent fundraising email from the West campaign. And in this email, it was very much similar to those of conventional campaigns in that they use this idea that we're coming to the end of a Federal Elections Commission deadline for reporting donations to the campaign. That is how their fundraising is doing. And they call that in the email a pivotal moment for the campaign, urging you to donate to help them at this pivotal moment. Well, it's not a pivotal moment. There's nothing pivotal about a filing deadline for your donations and expenditures. It's just a device to try to raise money, and they're using that. I don't think it's the best strategy to use, but maybe it's an effective strategy. So who knows? But the point is that they're making a concerted effort at fundraising. I haven't gotten that many fundraising emails, so I expect them to be regularly delivered to my email box right now. But even more importantly, I received an email that asked me to sign a petition supporting Cornel West as a Green Party member. And here it shows that they are getting focused on getting the Green Party nomination. What they need is 250 signatures coming from at least 10 states, with no more than 125 of those signatures per state counted towards the 250 threshold. And this is one of a number of criteria that they have to meet in order to become a recognized candidate within the Green Party. To be a recognized candidate means that you get access to postings on the Green Party social media, you get space on their website that lists candidates. You get invited to official candidate forums and things like that. So you get a lot more exposure within the Green Party once you're a recognized candidate. And to be a recognized candidate, you not only have to get signatures of support from Green Party members around the country in at least 10 different states, but you also have to meet certain fundraising thresholds, which are designed for a minor party like the Green Party. So I don't think Cornel West will have much trouble meeting those, and fill out a questionnaire and show that you have a website and you're filed with the Federal Elections Commission, all those kinds of things, just to show you're a serious candidate. I think most of those will be easily met by the West campaign, and they're working on the one that would be the more difficult, but not that formidable for them, which is getting signatures from Greens in a variety of different states supporting the West candidacy. So I see them making active efforts to get this campaign organized and to take the steps they need to do to run a large-scale campaign and get that nomination sewed down quickly. And that's all to the good. There was one other thing in that interview, though, that I thought added additional light to the reasons why Cornel West picked Peter Dows. Let's listen.
You are a music man. Many people probably don't know that you are a jazz pianist. Would you characterize yourself as such? And I wonder, do you talk to Cornel West, another music man aficionado, if you will, about music?
The answer is a hearty yes. I mean, we have probably the foundation of our conversations is jazz.
Both being jazz aficionados, they have a way to bond with each other and communicate through metaphors. So I think that will help their campaign as well. And it's something I hadn't considered as an obvious reason why those two might feel simpatico with each other, their mutual appreciation of American jazz. Okay, good. So this is going to be a well-run campaign. At least it looks like it's shaping up that way. But why is focusing on this campaign important? Why do I focus on it in these videos? It's not like I don't have other things to do with my time. Why is it important? Obviously he's not going to win. I think we can get that out of the way. It would take intervention by God to make this happen. I'm not saying that won't happen. God may be active in this. Who knows? I certainly hope so, but it's very unlikely he's going to win. So what's the point of a campaign? What's the point of ramping up a campaign, getting lots of volunteers engaged in it, getting lots of money, spending the money on it if you're not going to win? Well, one of the things that he said elsewhere in this interview was that they want to break the duopoly, the two-party system. What exactly was the phrase used? Yeah, break the duopoly. Now, I don't know how they think that's going to happen or what it would take to make that happen. I don't think that is that simple. How do you achieve that? The two-party system is not just a like held up by the inability of third-party candidates to get a lot of votes and maybe get elected to office. It's much more complicated than that. Our very constitutional system that separates power between a legislative body and an executive that's going to enforce laws, that executive can be only one person, and that means that anyone who's against the person in office is going to try to build a coalition against the person in office, and the rest of the folks who support the person in office are going to try to build coalitions to support the person in office. Those two coalitions become parties. Those two parties are both vying for the big prize, which is always the executive office. In this case, for this nation, the presidency of the United States. Now, in other countries, they have executives that are accountable to the legislature. That is, you elect in a legislature using often a form of proportional representation, and then the legislature chooses some of its members to be the executive committee. Somebody's appointed as a prime minister. So they're not only part of the legislature, but the legislature chooses them to be part of the executive and the executive cabinet. So in the United States, it's different because we have separate executive. There's always a tendency toward a two-party system. Plus, under capitalism, you have high inequality of wealth, and the people with a lot of wealth use that wealth to manipulate the political system, make sure they get the people they want in office. That's also a barrier. And then as well, you got a lot of electoral laws that make it hard for a third party to get on the ballot or to win because of the way votes are processed and all these things. So it's not that simple to break the duopoly. One campaign is going to do it. One victory in the presidency is not going to do it. Even if you get in office, you're not going to have the power to break the duopoly. So many things need to change, but we can work toward a long-term vision. And the most important thing here is not a single campaign, but it's whether that campaign can help build organizations for the long haul. I've said that in a number of ways at different times. It needs not only a vision that you're trying to move the country forward, but it needs a strategy. But let's first hear how Peter Dow expresses his desire for a vision that goes beyond our current system.
This capitalist system, the system itself, is causing mass suffering, mass misery. Most people don't know how they're going to pay for their next meal. There are people earning $80,000, $100,000 who can't even make ends meet. It's a system fundamentally, this is why I don't identify as an anarchist, because frankly, I don't know enough about anarchism as a philosophy. Again, I'm just
Same.
not, but that's the closest I come of a system. We have to restructure how humans coexist on this earth.
Well, they say they don't know much about anarchist philosophy, although they lean that way. I do know something about anarchist philosophy because I've long leaned that way. I would say that it envisions a society that's not built on coercion. That is, nobody can use force to try to make other people behave in a way they think they ought to. Now, that describes something very different from either capitalism, where even though there's a lot of people who deny it, there's a lot of coercion involved in the workplace and in the fact that most people have to get a job in a workplace where they have no say in decisions that are going to be made, or very little say. And it also does not describe the forms of socialism that people fear, how they imagine the Soviet Union worked in the old days and did in a lot of respects live up to its reputation. That kind of coercive apparatus would not be used for the welfare of the whole and the average citizen, but once it gets in someone's hands, it can be abused. So the anarchist vision is different than the forms of capitalism that we now have, or the forms of socialism that people have hesitations about. It is an alternative. It's often called non-hierarchical forms of organizing, but I think that's a misnomer. I think it's a little misleading. I would call it non-coercive. That is, it relies more on things like persuasion and voluntary cooperation and participation than on either rewards or punishments for doing things the way somebody thinks you should do them. The Green Party has long had leanings towards an anarchist vision, and early on it tried to incorporate that into its ways of operating, but it found it difficult for a number of reasons. Now let's look at the concept of grassroots democracy, because that is one of the four so-called pillars of Green parties around the world, which are social justice, nonviolence, grassroots democracy and why do I always forget environmentalism, even though I'm talking about green parties. Okay, environmental wisdom, environmentally conscious ways of living in the world. So grassroots democracy was one of the key principles from the outset. And early on at the first convention of what the organization that later evolved into or fed into the current Green Party in the United States, it was one of their 10 key values that they expressed. Now, they expressed it in a series of questions rather than in some kind of definition. And they asked questions like, how can we develop systems that allow and encourage us to control the decisions that affect our lives? How can we ensure that representatives will be fully accountable to the people who elect them? How can we develop planning mechanisms that would allow citizens to develop and implement their own preferences for policies and spending priorities, and so on? They expressed this as a series of questions because the people at the founding convention either could not agree or were not sure how to actually achieve this in practice. There have been a lot of experiments in this type of decision-making in grassroots democracy in the 1960s and 70s on the New Left and in various communes and cooperatives and support groups and things like that. But they found problems with them as well. Sometimes they could not make timely decisions, seemed impractical, different problems like that. So over time, the Green Party worked on this, and not always successfully, I think largely unsuccessfully, actually, but that's a matter of judgment. I don't know what goes on in a lot of states. I mostly know what's going on in Oregon. And I know some history of it, so I do know it's been a problem over time. Today, how the Green Party in the United States describes grassroots democracy is a bit different, a little more, less of a question, more of a declarative statements. First sentence, quote, all human beings must be allowed a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another, end quote. Okay, that's okay so far, but kind of vague on how to achieve that. How does everyone get a say in decisions? Quote, we work to improve public participation in every aspect of government and seek to ensure that our public representatives are fully accountable to the people who elect them, end quote. All right, this part is talking about representative democracy. So is that the kind of say that we get over the decisions that affect our lives? A vote to elect someone who's going to make decisions for us? Someone who necessarily is going to make decisions that not everyone can agree with, because there's a multiplicity of opinions among people all the time. To go on, quote, we also work to create new types of political organizations that expand the process of participatory democracy by directly including citizens in decision-making, end quote. Now that is a statement about direct democracy with citizens directly involved in making decisions, rather than representative democracy, which they just talked about in the previous sentence. So it's kind of a muddle of different conceptions of democracy: grassroots democracy, participatory democracy, direct democracy, representative democracy. How do you balance those? How do you clarify the role of each of those conceptions, and how does that work? They're somewhat different, right? There's tensions between them, and this is expressed not only in the Green Party's attitude towards how the world outside should function, how governments that we are trying to get elected to should function, what are we working towards, but it's those tensions come out internally within the Green Party, the inability to reconcile some of those concepts. So we see that as become an electoral organization, a political party that is, now it has to make timely decisions about things such as nominating candidates to public office by the time of a deadline to file with the state, or to set up a state central committee of some kind in compliance with state law to know who's accountable for handling the funds and keeping records and all those kinds of things. So now you've got a tension between the usual methods of participatory or grassroots democracy, direct democracy in particular, where people come together and they spend time talking and trying to build consensus so that they can get to a point where all of them agree enough on decisions and actions going forward that nobody feels like someone else is imposing this on them. They had an ability to talk it through till everybody agreed. as you can imagine, and is often found in practice, that can take a long time. The bigger the group and the less they know each other, the harder it is to achieve that kind of consensus. So in the history of the Green Party, they moved from like strong consensus toward, okay, consensus, we'll try to reach it, but at some point we're going to have to get at least the minimum threshold of votes. May have been 90%, may have been 75%, may have been 2/3. Now it's simply a majority. That's always a question of, did you get a say in the decision that affected you if you were in the 49% that voted against something as opposed to the 51% who did vote for it? So already they have issues that they have to contend with in making timely decisions. They can't sit there all night until everybody agrees. You'll drive people out of the party that way. We have driven people out of the party that way by trying to give everyone a say. It can take a long time. The more people you have, the less time you have. So hard to make decisions in a timely manner. That can be very frustrating. So there's a tension there. And how does the state body and, say, a membership convention, how do they interact? If you want to have a membership convention to have more membership participation in decisions and in the nominations to office, what's the role of the state central committee toward the convention? Do they have the responsibility and the power to make decisions about how that convention is going to be set up and run, to set the agenda, to choose a facilitator, to set time limits on it? Do they have the authority to do that, to make sure it runs smoothly and decisions that need to get made? Or is the ultimate power in the hands of the members who show up at a convention? Is it in their power to switch all the rules around? Now, I was just at a convention online of our state Green Party, the Pacific Green Party of Oregon, and that proved to be a big tension, and it has been a tension that we've discussed for a while now. What is the role of the state central body vis-a-vis conventions when conventions are not practical for timely decision making? There can be a lot of frustration trying to get things done in the limited time that we have, and lots of people want to speak to questions, even people who haven't given a lot of thought to it until it showed up on the convention agenda and they showed up for the convention. Or, what's the role of the state body? So these tensions show up in the party. How do you interact between those two? How much power do they have vis-a-vis everybody? How much participation should we have in conventions? Is it truly participatory if only those people who have the time and the resources to show up in person at a convention are the ones who do so? If you try to broaden the support to everybody who registers with the party, well, that would be so huge. I don't even know how it would be practical to do it. If you got thousands of people who register with the party, so are you going to narrow it down just to those who have the time and ability to show up and spend all day at a convention? Or are you going to give it to everybody, say, by an online voting system to make decisions and leave it up to them to figure out, what's at stake in this particular decision? That would seem to give you greater breadth of participation, but not as much depth of participation, because there's no discussions that are going on necessarily. People are not involved. Let me phrase it. People are not necessarily involved in the discussions leading up to decision, especially if they can easily vote online without being present for any kind of discussion or conversation. So all these conceptions of direct democracy or participatory democracy or representative democracy or grassroots democracy, they tend to fight against each other, and they're hard to resolve. And the process of trying to resolve them is already working within a system that is dysfunctional in many cases because of these tensions. That's what I've seen here in Oregon. We had this convention. One of the big things of our agenda was to try to pass new bylaws to create a new organizational structure with a different kind of configuration of these various things that you have to balance. But we scheduled 2 hours for it. We never got to it because we took up time with a lot of more trivial decisions, in my mind, trivial anyway, like, were we going to approve the agenda that was set by the state body? Were we going to add things to it? Were we going to approve changes in the language of the minutes for a previous convention? What kind of voting method were we going to use? Were we going to go with the one that had been decided beforehand? Or were we going to discuss all the alternatives and try to implement them at this particular convention? We spent so much time on just how to run the convention. We ran out of time for the discussion of the bylaws. Now, that's using a dysfunctional system to try to create a more functional system, probably not the best strategy now that I look at it in hindsight. And the outcome was that we didn't get through everything, and there was not a vote to extend. There's a motion to extend the length of the meeting, but it was voted down. But then there was not a motion to adjourn the meeting that could pass. So it ended just by the host of the Zoom meeting turning it off. And we all left. Nobody wanted to go back. I hope nobody went back to try to recreate it, because I had no idea what they would do or what legality would be involved there. Just a greater mess. My point being that to get involved in electoral strategy means that it's not for a single campaign. It's not for a single campaign season. It's not for a single candidate or even a single elected official, if they should be elected, or even a small set of elected officials that come out of a campaign. Those are not going to be enough to move us towards a vision of a different society. We need to have organizations. We need to tie in these kind of campaigns towards building organizations that are going to last over several election cycles and past the minor victories that we may have along the way and the major setbacks that we're going to have along the way, to build organizations that can try to clarify the vision of a new society that we're working for, and build institutions and build structures in our organizations that actually express and show how practical these kinds of ideas can be. I think it's possible. I think it's worth working toward. I doubt that it's going to be the Democratic Party. It might be the Democratic Socialists of America, or it might be the Green Party. I think right now with Dr. Cornel West's campaign, the Green Party has a path towards building its organization. And I think it also needs to look hard at how that organization is supposed to function and how it's going to balance these various competing conceptions of democracy. That is, clarify our philosophy, our underlying philosophy, and then build structures that actually actualize that, right? I think it can be done. I think it's necessary, and let's not blow it. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you got something out of it. I'm still pretty busy with other things and not able to put as much time into these videos as I would like. So if I'm not always clear, hopefully in the future I can come back to various topics and be more clear about them. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, however you reach this. If you're liking the topics I'm covering and would like to follow along, you can join in by leaving comments on my YouTube channel. You can subscribe, hit the notification bell, give a like to this, share it with other people to help spread it if you think it's worth that. And that's about it. Please come back again, and peace to you. Bye.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus, the moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on the vehicle Earth.